Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Really means a lot to me. Today I got a question from someone who is someone I know, someone that networked at Save Our Sites conference with. By the way, shameless plug, go right now, saveoursites.com. We've had auditors on. We've had an FDA auditor on last year. We're gonna try to have sponsor auditors on this year because this question is pertaining to: have you ever been through a sponsor audit, and what can I expect? So the answer is yes. I've been through it as a site many times. I would say like a dozen times. I've been doing this for, next year will be 20 years. So I would say I've been through about a dozen audits as a site. I've actually done a few audits on behalf of sponsors and CROs as well. So I kind of have both sides of the perspective. And sometime this week, I'm going to sit down with my actual template from my sponsor audit consulting gig that I had, and I'll just walk through it. A lot of it is very similar to a monitoring report template, but there's a little more emphasis on certain parts. So I'm going to talk about that right now. But first of all, we're going to discuss how do you avoid getting audited, and the answer is you kind of can't. There are some ways to not stick out and kind of increase your chances of not getting audited. But if you are a relatively new site, like Yuma Clinical Trials, by the way, and you do a decent amount of enrollment for a sponsor, and it's a relatively important study, you have a good chance of getting audited. And I tell my staff this all the time. Actually, today I'm meeting with a few of them. We need to clean up on a couple of things that I think we can be doing better as far as processes are concerned. And really, a sponsor audit is around your processes. So the main difference between a monitor visit and a sponsor audit is the sponsor audit is much more focused on your overall process. Everything that you're doing from a quality control, quality assurance standpoint is what they are looking at. Now, when a sponsor comes in to audit you, they obviously know what study they're going to audit. When the FDA comes in, sometimes they just audit a whole bunch of trials, or sometimes they're specifically coming in for one study. This is not about FDA audit. This is about sponsor audit. Personally, never been through a FDA audit, but we've had Patrick Stone on, who was at Save Our Sites last year and will be again. Should probably have him on again and go through it. But there's a lot of similarities between sponsor audits and FDA audits. A sponsor audit, you really shouldn't be too nervous, because at the end of the day, you and the sponsor both have similar objectives, and that is to make sure that you are FDA ready. The FDA doesn't have that objective. The FDA could care less if you're FDA ready. The FDA is looking out for patient safety. So, sponsor audit, not as intense, but sometimes they hire these personalities that are pretty intense themselves, and especially if they're more senior. Like, they hired me to do this. I think I was one of the relatively chill ones, and I went with my business partner, Chris Sopper. It was like a co-audit that we did. Back to sponsor audit. If you want to reduce your chances, don't be a high enroller, and don't stick out too much as far as your screen fail ratios are concerned or critical deviations. So that's how to avoid. Now let's get into what it is. When I got called to audit a site, they being the sponsor or the CRO, usually it's the sponsor, give me the previous monitoring visit reports so I could read through it. So I'm not just showing up at the site not knowing what's going on contextually with that site. I understand by reading the last couple of monitoring visit reports and follow-up letters, I kind of get an understanding of what this site's doing, what this site's struggling with. Are they improving the things that they're supposed to be improving? Because remember, monitors give you the chance to improve your processes. So if you're not, that becomes evident during the audit. And that actually becomes evident prior to the audit just by going through the monitoring visit reports. So if you're a site, make sure you fix your action items at every monitoring, and make sure if there's a chance to improve, a chance to retrain, a chance to correct one of your processes, make sure you do that. Because when the sponsor is coming in, they're seeing if you did that. They're looking at the opportunities you've had to remedy your systematic errors. And that's really what it is. It's the process of how you operate in the context of that particular study. Now, the first thing I do, besides being prepared when I was auditing, the first thing I do, the week before the audit, I'll go read through the monitoring visit reports and I'll make some notes. Usually they're informed consent issues or critical deviations. Once in a while there's some pretty drastic patient safety stuff, like misdosing and things like that. I kind of have a sense of what I'm looking at before I go in. Now, most of the time, it's those three things I mentioned, right? It's consenting issues, it's critical deviations, and it's sometimes dosing issues, in that order. The first thing I do when I get to the site, I ask for the SOPs. I want to see your standard operating procedure. Once I get that, the first thing I go to is the SOP for informed consent. What is your process of consent? I'm going to look at all the details, and then I'm going to look at your source, and I'm going to see if you're following your own process of consent. Now, a little sidebar here. Sometimes a sponsor audit, well, not sometimes, a sponsor audit is also an audit in a way of the site's CRA. So it's not just an audit of the site, it's an audit of the site's CRA, who's supposed to be monitoring that study. Are they missing stuff? How do I know that what's in that monitoring visit report is actually correct? And how do I know that what's in that monitoring visit report is all that there is? So this is why the sponsors send auditors to go into the site and double check. So in a way, you're also auditing the CRA indirectly. So I'll look at the SOP, I'll look at the informed consent, and maybe I already find something. Maybe I already find something that the monitor missed, such as if the site SOP says every page of the informed consent will be initial and dated, but they don't actually do that on the actual informed consent because the IRB says you don't have to on this study, that's a finding. And that's a critical finding because the site's not following their own SOP. What else are they not following? So then I'm going to dig deeper. So that's a finding. So make sure if you're a site, you are following your SOP. I don't care what the IRB told you. I don't care what the sponsor told you. If it's that serious to where what the sponsor or IRB is telling you needs to change the system that you run at your site, then you need to change your SOP. So one or the other. You either got to obey your SOP or you've got to adjust your SOP in order to comply with a sponsor or an IRB requirement. That's it. There's no in between. You can't pick and choose. Right now I want to follow my SOP. Right now I want to follow what the IRB says. No. And that's a big finding. The next thing I look at is what's the process of consent? Where is it documented? It's not enough to just get the consent obtained the way that in the format that the SOPs state. Where is it documented that we did all that? Especially reconsenting. I see a lot of sites doing process of consent on initial screening, but what about reconsenting when there's a new amendment to the ICF? Okay, you obtained it. Did you obtain it at the next available visit? A lot of times, no. And what's the process of consent? You got to repeat the process of consent. So, and then make sure that that process of consent is going to match up with the SOP. So that's consenting. If I find something there, I go to other elements of the SOPs. Namely, I focus on where the deviations occurred, and especially the critical deviations. So if I see a deviation, and this is where I'll combine it with dosing errors. If I see a deviation, or if I see a series of deviations that are around the same theme, like dosing errors, or patient didn't dose appropriately as per protocol, I'm digging deeper. Well, did the site do a CAPA plan? No. Well, did they retrain? Where's the training log? No or yes. Either one, doesn't matter. Did they fix the issue? And if the answer is no, or if their CAPA plan, corrective action, preventative action plan, said that they're going to implement a new change, either where is that new change in the SOP, or is it actually being implemented when it comes to looking at the source document? And if that's not the case, that's another finding. And then it goes down, as far as range of importance. You're basically doing a risk-based monitoring visit, and it depends how long you have. Typically, the auditors, some may, others don't look at the EDC. When I monitored or when I audited, I don't think I looked at the EDC. You can see from monitoring reports if the site's entering data timely and if they're answering queries timely, because if they're not, that's a action item usually. So they don't waste time like most monitors do, and I'm not saying that's a waste of time to look at source data verification, but they're looking at higher level things like following systems, following processes, implementing change, continuous quality assurance. Those are the things that an auditor is looking at. Of course, they get into regulatory. Of course, they get into some of the more nuanced things like how are you documenting that you're paying your patients? I know this particular one because I've been asked when my site was audited by a sponsor, like, hey, we understand you're paying your patients, or you're supposed to, but where's the proof? And this was in the days before ClinCard, and some studies still don't use ClinCard or e-payments. Where's the proof? Is there a log that patients are being paid? Those were some of the things. Another issue was our database. How are we getting patients from our database? Like, how are we protecting the protected health information of patients? They'll really dig deep into your SOPs. So make sure you're following your SOPs. Make sure if there's no audit on your radar as a site, if you get nothing else out of this video, go through your SOPs right now and really think to yourself and ask yourself, and maybe this is a team effort. This is something Katie and I did recently. Katie's my lead CRC. Do we need this part in our SOP? Are we actually doing this? If we're actually doing it, fine. If it's in our SOP and we're not doing it, why is it in there? Either why is it in there, do we need it, or why are we not following it? So hopefully this helps. I know it's vague. They can look at a lot of things. They kind of know what they're looking at before they come in. But these three things are the big ones that 90% of audits will look at, if not 100. Consents, critical deviations, and dosing or IP issues. Of course, regulatory, but then how that all pertains to your actual systems and processes. Hopefully this helps. Like, subscribe, comment, share, Guru Nation. Catch you all later. Bye-bye.